The headline is how the Lone Star State. Well, it's actually an error in the headline. How the Lone Star State's recruiting has changed, and we've talked a little bit about it here on the show about how the landscape of football in Texas has shifted. In a lot of respects, it used to be, here's Texas, and then a gap, and then everyone else. Now, I think that gap is a little overstated. I think that there have been, especially Texas A&M, have always recruited well, and that the gap between what Texas and A&M has been able to do, I think that gap was a little bit overstated. But the point is that it's not wrong that it used to be Texas and then everybody else. And that is not the way it is now. Now there's a lot more parity, I think, in recruiting across the Lone Star State. And I highly recommend the story written by Sam Kahn Jr., who joins us now on the phone to talk about it. Sam, thanks for your time. Appreciate you hopping on with us.
No problem. Thanks for having me. How are you?
Doing great. So you write this story about the changing landscape of recruiting in the state of Texas. And when you were talking to a lot of different people, including head coaches, coordinators all across the state, was the overall consensus that things have significantly changed here in the last 3-4 years?
Without question. And I think the biggest consensus I heard from talking to coaches was A&M's move to the SEC was probably the biggest reason for the change because of what it has done in allowing schools from the SEC West in particular access to the state or better access to the state. It's not that they didn't recruit it before, but now with the guaranteed game every 2 years in the state of Texas, that's an additional selling point for Ole Miss, Mississippi State, schools like that. I mean, Alabama is going to recruit on a national level anyway, so that hasn't changed. But even with Bama, you've seen them come in and take the top defensive back recruit in the state of Texas the last few classes. So I think that's been the biggest reason. But there's no doubt it's changed because 10 years ago, like we said, it was a dominant Texas. It was their state. It was Longhorn State, and since then it is diversified. And really, like you said, in the last 5 years, because of Baylor's rise to the top of the Big 12, TCU's rise. Now Houston's a factor. And like I said, A&M, had a couple of seasons where they led the state in recruiting, and that opened the doors for the rest of the conference. So it has changed quite a bit when you talk to people, and it's fascinating because I think what it has made it is more competitive than we've ever seen it.
Do you think that Texas A&M, obviously they've benefited from the move, but do you think that the move was better for the other teams in the SEC maybe than it was for Texas A&M?
It certainly seems like right now it's better for Ole Miss because you look at the top 10 recruits in the state of Texas, at least according to our ranking, and A&M didn't sign one of them, and Ole Miss signed two, Greg Little and Deontay Anderson. And those are two guys that A&M would have loved to have. Of course, Little was committed to A&M for a little while, and then Anderson was someone they heavily pursued in the process, but they ended up getting neither of them, and they were shut out of the top 10 of the state. The highest ranked kid they got in our rankings was Justin Matabuke out of McKinney. So that's not to say that Texas A&M isn't doing well. They still are, but I think it has hurt them, and it has helped, like you said, the other schools in that conference, particularly in the SEC West. I don't think you see the SEC East schools in here as often. I mean, Mizzou does recruit. Texas always has under Gary Pinkel. It'll be interesting to see if they do that under Barry Odom. Florida, is going to spot recruit here and there. They landed Tyree Cleveland, but you're not going to see them a lot. Georgia, you're not going to see a lot. But those SEC West programs you will see, and you've seen Mississippi State in here, you've seen Ole Miss, you've seen Auburn come into the area. Arkansas, of course, for its proximity, will typically recruit, and LSU always has. But I think it has definitely helped the other schools in that division.
Of course, you mentioned the big bully on the block used to be Texas. That you said it used to be a Longhorn State. It no longer is. What is the biggest factor you think that went into Texas, as you put it, coming back to the pack?
I think just the lack of success in the last 5-6 years. I mean, winning is the bottom line here, and they had 9 straight seasons of 10-plus wins, and they've now gone 6 straight seasons without reaching that mark. I think they've got to get back to winning double-digit games on a perennial basis and contending for championships. I mean, I remember when they were at their height under Mac Brown, they were contending for Big 12 titles, contending for national championships. They were near the top of the rankings. that hasn't been in the cards for them in recent years, and that's definitely hurt them. And kids want to win. I mean, the facilities are great, the school and, the atmosphere, the location, those are all great things. But I think at the end of the day, most kids want to play and they want to win, and that's one big thing. That's what makes the way Charlie Strong finished off this class so impressive, because they were sitting behind Baylor, TCU, Houston, A&M in the recruiting rankings. And, of course, this was strategic on Charlie's part to kind of lay in the weeds a little bit and try and close out strong with picking up a lot of late commitments rather than getting early commitments, which is a total departure from what it was 10 years ago when Mac Brown was getting all the early commits. And it worked out beautifully. You've got to give Strong and his staff a lot of credit for the way they were able to recruit off of a 5-7 season, because I think now they're starting to build back the talent base that they need to get those kind of double-digit win seasons.
We're talking to Sam Kahn of ESPN.com here on DCTF Live. Involve the conversation at hashtag DCTF Live. Two other schools that have really changed the recruiting landscape in the state, TCU and Baylor, kind of for different reasons. TCU, with the move from the Mountain West to the Big 12, obviously had a big implication. And then Baylor, kind of going from perennial also-ran to perennial power, has shot up the recruiting rankings. For you, how much has their rise changed how things really operate in the state?
Big time, because what has changed that I can see is that it's pushed out Oklahoma and Oklahoma State to some extent. You saw this year both Oklahoma and Oklahoma State sign fewer Texans than they have in the last 10 years. And the reason is because Baylor and TCU is gobbling them all up. Oklahoma and Oklahoma State were able to beat out Baylor and TCU for those Dallas-Fort Worth or North Texas area recruits with regularity, because Baylor was not that good 10 years ago, and for TCU's sake, they weren't in a power conference. So Oklahoma and Oklahoma State had that as a carrot to sell to recruits. Now, like you said, TCU is in the Big 12, so now they're on an even playing field. Baylor has now, they've won a couple conference championships. Robert Griffin III winning the Heisman was a huge boon for their recruiting. McLean Stadium being built. TCU has had, renovations at their stadium as well. So those things all put them on an even playing field with Oklahoma and Oklahoma State. So now it's a lot easier for them to sell the North Texas recruits on staying close to home and being able to win and compete for a Big 12 championship. That's something you couldn't sell them 10 years ago, because TCU wasn't in the conference and Baylor wasn't in the conversation. So, now they can actually stay close to home, and they can go to one of those schools and win a Big 12 title and possibly go to the playoff, which that's just, if we would have said that 10 years ago, I think we would not have believed that would have been possible. But that's a testament to how fast things have changed. The job that Art Briles has done building Baylor from where it was, and the job that Gary Patterson has done. I mean, he's been at his post longer than any other power conference head coach in the state, since 2000. And I think that stability says something for TCU. And I think they were already winning wherever they were, whether it was Conference USA, the WAC, the Mountain West, and now they're just continuing to do that at the Big 12 level.
When I look across the state, the one thing I'm struck by is the diversity in coaching, and especially a lot of newer, exciting young coaches coming in. Guys like Cliff Kingsbury, Tom Herman, what he's doing at Houston, Chad Morris, his work at SMU, to a lesser extent, maybe a step below that, Everett Withers at Texas State, Seth Luttrell, Frank Wilson, the trio of new coaches in the state of Texas. Do you get the feeling that the way that the landscape is right now in recruiting is not going to stay the same, and that's going to continue to shift over the next couple of years?
A little bit. I think for right now, I think it's going to sit like we see it right now, where it's going to be a free-for-all, just because, the way the current crop of coaches we have, especially within the power conference schools and even Houston in the conversation, you have coaches that have deep Texas ties. Cliff Kingsbury, Texas high school product, son of a Texas high school football coach. Chad Morris, former Texas high school football coach. Art Briles, Texas high school football coach. Tom Herman, not in that category, but has spent his entire career recruiting the state of Texas. Was stopped at Sam Houston State, Rice, Texas State, and now is at Houston. So he ties to Texas there. Gary Patterson has been in his post, like you said, since 2000. So these are all guys who have relationships throughout the state. And then you see the way they hire assistants. You see Tom Herman hires Corby Meekins. You see Cliff Kingsbury hired Mike Jackson. Of course, now he's at Bowling Green. He's made high school coaches hires to his staff. Chad Morris has hired Claude Mathis. You see those kind of hires going on, and that makes it I think it gives those programs more of a chance to fight for talent because they're bringing in guys with instant relationships that don't have to spend time. A coach like an Everett Withers, for instance, he's going to have to build a lot of bridges in the state in relationships with the coaches in the state of Texas. Frank Wilson, most of his background's in Louisiana. Again, a guy who's going to have to build some relationships in the state of Texas. I think with the current power coaching structure we have right now, I think you're going to see it, kind of stay the way it is for the next cycle or two. But as coaches change, I think you see it continue to shift. And again, wins and losses play a factor in that. If Texas starts to rise, then I think you see them start to win a little bit more. If A&M, if they don't have a better season, then they're going to start, continue to tumble down the rankings if they have the last 2 years. All these things are all factors. I think it does continue to evolve and shift, but I think not necessarily immediately. I think right now the landscape as we see it is going to kind of stay that way for at least the next cycle.
Aside from being a college football reporter, Sam Kahn is known as America's best-dressed sports writer.
This is true.
And Sam, if you could give our audience one bit of advice, we're going to assume, talking to the males in the audience. If you give us one piece of fashion advice, what would it be?
Make sure your shoes look good.
Okay.
That matters. I think a lot of people forget that part. And I, for a long time, was one of those guys that the shoes were an afterthought.
Yeah.
Your shoe game has to be on point. I think people look at the whole thing, and if you have a really nice suit and you have the pocket square and the tie and even a hat or something like that, and your shoes look ratty, then it ruins the whole thing. It absolutely ruins the whole thing.
That's a great point. He is Sam Kahn, Jr. of ESPN.com. Follow him on Twitter at SKHANJR. Sam, appreciate your time, bud, and enjoy your weekend.
Hey, no problem. Thanks for having me. Y'all too.